Today, on A Word on Westerns, Karen Sharpe.
I said, I have to work opposite Clint again? He said, can I work with Eric Fleming? You're too young. You're going to work with Clint. I said, oh, okay. I don't know, but he just didn't give me anything. In the scene, he'd say, I love working with you. You do all the work.
Welcome to A Word on Westerns, where we talk to the greatest Western creators of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Hello, I'm R.J. Word.
And I'm Rob Word. Welcome to A Word on Westerns, the podcast. She's an actress that a lot of you know from a wide-ranging array of genres. She was the Jungle Girl in a Bomba, the Jungle Boy movie with Johnny Sheffield. She was under personal contract to John Wayne and was in High and the Mighty. She also starred in her own Western series with Don Durant called Johnny Ringo. Do you know who I'm talking about, young man?
According to the piece of paper in front of me, it's Karen Sharpe Kramer.
Oh, that's right. She married Stanley Kramer. So tell me what you know about Stanley Kramer.
Well,
it's a good test.
It is a good test. Stanley Kramer made a lot of films in the 60s and earlier, but...
well, he made one with your godfather.
Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Sidney would have said that much better than me. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? That man had the best diction of anyone I've ever met.
You're talking about Sidney Poitier.
Yes.
So before we get to Karen, tell me what your memories of Sidney are, because I'm curious, because I know he would come over every Monday so that he'd be here at 3 o'clock when you were coming home from elementary school to hang out.
Yeah, he was just a really, really cool dude. And to a kid, you don't ever really understand the magnitude or scale of a person's impact on the world. I mean, to me, he was just always Sidney and always was a lot of fun. We had cool handshakes.
And he had a great laugh.
He had a great laugh, and he had a voice that could control any room he walked into.
He did.
Coming home from school, I remember one time, the house that my dad lives in, that I grew up in, there were pine cones in the trees, in these really big pine trees around the house. And one time, a squirrel managed to hack one at Sidney's head pretty hard. And yeah, he was the only person I know who ever got hit by one of those, but we've had so many close calls, and he brushed it off like it was nothing. But yeah, he didn't come over after that. No, I'm kidding.
No, I know he did. And he did have a great laugh. But Karen married Stanley Kramer, and she's going to tell us about how she met him. And she said no to him so many times. It's a wonderful story. She's a terrific storyteller as well. So if you want to know about Karen Sharpe and Duke and how she got out of the contract.
Yeah, she was one of the, and you'll hear about this in the interview, but she was one of the first people, or one of the first women to really fight to be on TV, to leave her film contract, because she saw an opportunity for herself there to grow in a way that she wouldn't have been able to had she stuck to films.
That's quite insightful. I'm glad you remembered that. So let's get to Karen right now and let her share her stories with all of you out there. So thank you for joining us today on A Word on Westerns. Right now, it's Karen Sharpe.
Great audience. You have a great audience.
Well, I happen to have
Oh my God.
the Golden Globe for the High and the Mighty, the most promising newcomer of the year.
One of the very few non-Westerns that Duke made.
Well, he did a couple. In fact, you were in another Fat Jet production.
Yes.
Man in the Vault with William Campbell, which had Paul Fix and all the regular people that Duke used. And didn't Andy McLaughlin direct that?
Yes, he did. And he was the son of Victor McLaughlin, one of the other members of that stock company. And Andy McLaughlin was the AD on The High and the Mighty. And it was a fluke how I got that role. I had done Vamba and the Jungle Girl. That is true.
I love the Bomba movies.
I want to tell you a little story about that. And that is one night I was sitting next to Walter Mirisch. You know who Walter Mirisch is. He's a great producer, very famous. West Side Story, all these made
The Great Escape, The Magnificent Seven.
great movies. And I'm sitting next to him one night at dinner, at a dinner party, and he said, Karen, what was your first movie? I said, oh, The High and the Mighty. And he said, well, what about Bomba and the Jungle Girl? And I said, oh my God. Well, yes, I did make that movie. I said, but Walter, how would you know that? He said, I produced it. Don't you remember? So a few years go by and I had the idea to do Aladdin. Hello. I didn't do it, obviously, but somebody else did. And I went to see him in his office at Universal. And I'm walking down this long hallway with all these great poster boards, beautifully framed, of all of his major films. So I get up to his office and I say, hi, Walter. I want to ask you something. Where is the poster beautifully displayed of Bomba and the Jungle Girl? I don't see it among all your other films. And he said, well, I just can't find a poster board of it. I said, well, I've got two, so I'll give you one. But the next time I come here, I better see it displayed just as beautifully as West Side Story, since you're so terribly fond of it. So that's my Walter Mirisch story, and that's that Bomba the Jungle Girl. But anyway, The High and the Mighty was just such a lucky break for me because, you know, in those days, if you were in a film such as that, with all the Academy Award nominations, and you were introduced as a young newcomer into the industry, with John Wayne behind you, I mean, it just assured you of actually having a career. Not so today, however. But what happened on that was I had a great agent. He only had 10 clients. His name was Leon Lance. James Arness was a client just before me. So I had to wait my turn until he could get James Arness started. His career started. James was in a film, so he figured it was time to work with Karen Sharpe now. So he took me to Bat Jack, this little house off Sunset Boulevard, which was Bat Jack. And they were hiring actors for a film called The High and the Mighty. I knew nothing about it, but Andy McLaughlin was in the office that day. And William Wellman was the director. He was not there. But Andy said, you know, you would be just great for this one part of Nell Buck. I'm the assistant director, but I'm going to give you the sides. I want you to show up tomorrow morning at Warner's at 7 o'clock in the morning to test for this role. So I took the sides and I thought, read it, and I thought, wow, God, what am I going to wear? So I went out shopping, like all women. I went out shopping to look for the outfit I was going to wear for the screen test. Well, Mr. Wellman came back to the studio and said, what do you mean you're going to test this girl? I never met her. He said, you get on the phone right now and you just tell her, sorry, don't show up. So Andy tried to reach me. Well, we didn't have message services in those days, you know? And if I wasn't home, I wasn't home. So I wasn't home and he could never reach me.
You were showing up early for the test?
Well, that was that night. He called, but he couldn't leave a message for me because we didn't have any message machines in those days. So the next morning, I'm always early for my call. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be there. So I arrived before 7 o'clock. Well, it would have it that John Smith was supposed to be testing with another girl. There were 10 tests, and I think his scene was 8. He was the 8 in line with his leading lady, who pulled out of the deal that morning. So he had no one to test with. But I was there, not knowing I wasn't supposed to test. So I thought, oh, good, we'll put him with this girl, whatever her name is. So I thought it was just supposed to be that way. I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to be there at all. Nobody told me that until afterwards. Anyway, we get in front of Bill Wellman, the director, who was a very famous, well-known director. And he just talked to us a little bit and just wanted to put the first rehearsal on film. So I said, hello, Mr. Smith. Nice to meet you, John Smith. And then we played this love scene. when he said cut, he said, "Where have you been? You are my Nell Buck," and you can play Milo. But he said, "You are my Nell Buck." And we had that job before we left the studio that day. I don't know what they did with the other 2 tests that were to come after us, but I got that job with John Smith, who I had just met. It was a very heady experience for me because everybody was a star in that film. Dan Sterling, Claire Trevor, Robert Newton, Robert Stack, William Campbell, who I'd already made a little film with, so I knew him. And then when we were making the film, the Duke would come down and stand right next to the camera to watch us perform, And it was kind of scary because Mr. Wellman was pretty scary too, actually. But it was like he was grinning all the time. He was so proud of us. And of course, they gave us a great send-off. We were introduced in the film, and the film had so many nominations. It is a great film. And I was very lucky, chosen to be nominated for this Golden Globe here. And I was against Kim Novak, who was starting her career and it was in films, and Shirley MacLaine. But I won it. Well, they did all right. They didn't need me. I mean, Kim Novak and Shirley MacLaine are certainly wonderful stars. They did really great. And then there was the makeup artist ball that they don't have that anymore, but they used to, for all newcomers in the industry. And I know Kim Novak was there representing Columbia Pictures. I was there representing Batjack. And these beautiful gowns we were to wear. Well, Mr. Wayne knew I didn't have that kind of money for those kinds of gowns, and he really wasn't a studio. So he took me to Amelia Gray, which was on Rodeo Boulevard. She was the real deal of the best clothes in town, and bought me the most beautiful ball gown. So I would be at my best with that, which I got that award too.
Were you already under contract to Batjack?
I was. I guess because I won the Golden Globe, he put me under contract to him. Now, Andy McLaughlin, who really wanted to be a director, who was the AD on I Am the Mighty, and I can only thank Andy, Mr. Wellman, and Mr. Wayne for this award. The very first thing he ever directed was called Man in the Vault with William Campbell, and all the actors had worked with Wayne for many, many years, were Paul Fix and all these wonderful actors were in that film. Good little movie. I'm very proud of that little movie. But I went to Mr. Wayne and I said, "Look, I need to talk to you about something. I love being under contract. This is really a great honor. But let's get real. I'm too young to play opposite you. And all the studios have their contract players. And if you can't loan me out because they already have young people like me at every studio. So I know this is not a traditional thing to do, and it's sometimes looked upon as not the right thing to do. But I want to go to television. Would you allow me to do that?" And he said, "Absolutely." I said, "Because I want to do live television when it was live. So he allowed me and said, "Go right to it." And so I think that's really why I had so much television, because he allowed me to do it.
Well, you did so much great television, especially, it seems like all of the Westerns. You must have appeared in
About 40 of them, yes, I did. And some of them more than twice.
But you were a regular the first part of the season on Johnny Ringo that was created and produced by Aaron Spelling, one of his very first.
It was his first.
How did you meet Aaron Spelling?
Well, I did one little film for Ida Lupino. Remember Ida Lupino? She was a wonderful actress. She became a director, and her husband, Collier Young, produced a film called Mad at the World. And I was the young star in it. And every day I go to lunch, I was always eating with a crew. I'd see this guy, this little funny-looking, wide-eyed, big guy over in the corner by himself. And I kept thinking, why is he by himself? It's not right. He must be a very lonely person. It's not right. So I went over and introduced myself and said, would you like to come and have lunch with me? And he said, oh, I can't do that. You're a star. I said, that's ridiculous. I said, we're all working. I don't buy that for 1 minute. I said, where are you from? He said, Texas. I said, oh, me too. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, born and raised. And I said, I see you have a wedding ring. Are you married? He said, yes. I said, well, what does she do? And he said, well, she's an actress. And I said, well, great. Is she working? No.
And this was Carolyn Jones, who was married to.
So I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I said, I get a lot of offers and I can't do everything. So give me your number. And when I get an offer, I'll call you, get her on it. Does she have an agent? Yes. I said, oh, that's great. I said, let's get her on it. So I did that. And she did damn well, didn't she? Anyway, so didn't even need me, I don't think. So several years go by, and I get a call from CBS. And they said, Karen, we've had a request for you to star in a television series. I said, is it going to be a Western? And he said, yes. It's Aaron Spelling. And I said, And I said, sounds so familiar, that name. He said, well, you've met him. I said, I have. He said, this is his very first thing. I said, his first thing? And he said, yes, and he wants you. I said, he does. And he said, yes, because he said that you were so nice to him on a film that you were starring in, and he had a very small part. And you made him have lunch with you, and you helped his wife get work. And so he wanted to pay you back in a lovely way. I said, that's so sweet. I'm in. I'll do it. Absolutely. It was his first show. It wasn't a successful Western, I don't think. I did him the favor for the first year, and then I really wanted to get out of it. I wanted to play her as a tomboy. I didn't want to be a pretty little thing in town, seeing him once in a while. It's not my kind of thing. But anyway, he did all right. Didn't he?
Yes, he did. That was such an interesting show because Don Durant, who was the lead, had a 6 gun with a shotgun shell on it as well. And this was a gimmick for the lead of the show where you'd see the bad guy, they're counting shots, and they never counted shots in Westerns. So he's shooting at him 6 times, and then like James Coburn gets up and goes, he's out of bullets. And then the hero blows him away with a shotgun shell. It's like so strange in that show. But that's when all of the Westerns had to have a gimmick weapon.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was his. One of my favorite roles that you did is in one of my favorite shows, Gunsmoke.
Oh, yeah, that's a great show.
You played this impetuous young woman who liked to get men arguing over you and then killing each other.
Yeah, great role.
Is that the sort of tomboy role you were looking for?
No, I didn't know. But I love to play bad girls. They're more interesting,
No, that was the half-hour Gunsmoke.
I think it was in black and white.
Yes, the best ones, I think, too.
I did a couple of them I liked.
John Meston wrote the script on that, too.
James Arness, I already knew. That was a show that was offered to Duke Wayne, actually. Did you know that? And they put James in it instead. And he was great. I sometimes watch those shows on television.
I think Andy McLaughlin directed that episode.
He did direct it, yes. I have a great relationship I did with Andy McLaughlin, and I'm very grateful to him. Yeah, and then I did another one called Drywell, which I also like, where Burt Reynolds was kind of starting his career, and he had an ongoing role.
Mm-hmm. He was Quint.
Yeah, that's right, he was. No, I didn't work out.
They threw him down a dry well.
That's it.
And he's rated a lot of tension in that one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Played a bad girl in that one, too.
Well, the bad girls, I guess, were the most fun.
They're the best roles. Yes, exactly.
I loved growing up Jock Mahoney. He was the range rider. He was Yancey Derringer. And
he was a stuntman.
The most amazing thing in the episode you're in, he gets on his horse a different way each time. And you think he's just like springing. His legs were giant springs. He stands next to his horse and all of a sudden he's on top of it.
But he was tall too, it didn't hurt.
And good looking.
Oh, very good. He was a very nice man. I think I worked with him twice. And he was a gentleman. People always say, did you get a chance to know people really well? Well, you're so busy working and just trying to do your part. You don't get a chance to have, really long relationships with a lot of the people you work with. You wish you did have time for, but you don't always. I remember him being very lovely and very lovely to me.
Well, that's great to hear because he's everybody's favorite, too.
See, I'm glad. He deserved to be.
He was a Tarzan later on, too. You could have been Tarzan and the Jungle Girl.
Well, no, we had Boy, and those films were really directed by Ford Beebe. And it was shot in like 10 days. We made
10 days, that's a long shoot for those.
Well, I thought that was pretty quick. But it was, And
you were on like a sound stage with jungle stock footage that you'd look at.
Well, no, we were really in Pasadena. Some kind of...
The jungles of Pasadena?
Yeah, it was the jungles of Pasadena and some kind of a park thing. Gunsmoke was on a soundstage most of the time. But
well, you also worked with Clint Eastwood a couple of times on Rawhide.
I did, and I had a terrible crush on Eric Fleming, who played Boss.
Yo Favor.
And yeah, oh God, I had a terrible crush on him. And so Clint and I had the same agent. We were at William Morris. I said, I have to work opposite Clint again? He said, can I work with Eric Fleming? You're too young. You're going to work with Clint. I said, Oh, okay. And I was so disappointed. I don't know, but he just didn't give me anything in the scene. He'd say, I love working with you. You do all the work. But, it's true. I would say, react, but then it was always on the screen. So sometimes you're not sure that the other actor opposite you was doing pretty good work. I was very complaining about him all the time. I was pretty stupid to complain, wasn't I? Anyway, he was great. He was very sweet. He's still the same old Clint today. He always sees me. He's wonderful. And he's so successful. And he's become such a great director.
So the episode you were in, you're one of 3 daughters that Victor Jory has, and he's trying to marry all 3 of the daughters off.
Yes.
And he hooks you up with Clint.
That's right.
Yeah. And you were saying, where's the trail boss?
Well, I tried with him, but I couldn't get him to marry me in that episode either.
You did a Trackdown also with Robert Culp.
Yes, I've never have seen that. At that time, and if you were working, and luckily a lot of us were working, and we sometimes not get home until 9 or 10 o'clock, and if a show was on at 7 or 8, you had no way of actually taping them, so you'd miss it. It's on Saturday mornings now.
I think right now, the time that we're living in with the proliferation of all of these multiple channels, this is the golden age of television.
It is.
At least the golden age of classic television.
Well, the business has gotten to be such a huge business. Too much product. You don't get a chance to see everything. I'm a judge for the Emmys several times, and I can't tell you how many box sets I get. I could fill this whole auditorium with that many. And am I going to be able to see all that? I don't know how you sustain a career like we used to, because the business was a smaller business and you got a chance to know everybody, and you could actually be seen. Your work could be seen. Today, it's very hard to be seen because, the show, no time to see all of that.
I know you mentioned to me that you're remaking or planning to remake High Noon,
yes,
Stanley Kramer. How did you meet Stanley?
Oh, this is my favorite story to tell. Thank you for asking me.
Okay.
Jerry Lewis had asked me to be his leading lady several times. And I said, can I be funny? No. I said, no. I said, Jerry, you want me to be a straight man to you, right? He said, yes. I said, I don't want to do that. I don't know how to play those vacuous girls. I just don't know how to do that. But thank you for asking. So my father passed away unexpectedly, and I had to go back to Texas and settle the estate, and I was gone for about a year. When I came back, it's hard to get back into the business when you've been gone a year. He knew he had me. So he said, okay, I'm going to triple your salary. Edith Head will make all your clothes. It was an offer I really couldn't refuse. So I said, thank you. I'd be thrilled.
Was this Disorderly Orderly?
It's Disorderly Orderly. So on the next soundstage across from where we were working was a film called Ship of Fools. And every day in the Paramount commissary, I would see this long table against the wall, and in would walk, Oscar Werner, then Simone Signoret, and Jose Greco, and Lee Marvin, and Vivian Leigh, okay? I kept watching that table, and that was that director, I couldn't think what was his name, was there. So finally, I got enough courage to walk onto that set. Now, I've been in the business now 20-something years. I had never walked onto anybody's set. I stayed on my own set. I found it hard enough just to do what I'm doing. And I was not looking for another job because I usually had one waiting for me. But this particular time, to see Vivian Leigh work was a thrill to me. So I walked onto that set. Stanley Kramer had that ship. That whole ship was on that soundstage. I have never seen anything like that in my life. And yes, she was actually in rehearsal working. And I hear this voice, who is that? And I'm thinking, I'm in the water part of the ship. It's me. And that's that director, what's his name? And I thought, I shouldn't be here. It's a closed set. So somebody took pity on me and went over and said to Mr. Kramer, that's Karen Sharpe. Okay, you can stay. Thank you, I said. I thought, so I left, okay? So a couple of days later, I'm walking to the commissary, and that guy who saved my butt that day said, Karen. He said, why didn't you stay? Because Stanley Kramer wanted to meet you. I said, oh, that's who that guy is. That's right. I said, well, why isn't this film cast? He said, well, I don't know if that's what he had in mind. I said, oh, well, I don't get involved with that. I don't get involved. So a couple of days later, my manager comes to visit me on the set, and he says, Karen, I had a call from the Kramer office. I said, oh, is there a part in the thing? He said, no, he wants to take you to dinner. I said, you've known me well enough to know I don't do that. I said, if he wants to see me, I will be happy to read for him over the desk, but I don't get involved with any of these people any other way. I said, you know that. He said, I do know that. A year later, Stanley's still calling. He finally says, my manager says, Karen, you take this phone call because I'm tired of tap dancing, make an excuse for you every once in a while. Mr. Kramer's office calls. I said, have him call me. Mr. Kramer, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm working. I never go out when I'm working. Well, can't you sew on a pair of blue jeans? I said, Mr. Kramer, I don't wear blue jeans. I said, well, he said, I'll call you next week. I said, fine. I said, tell you what, I'm working at Republic Studios. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll meet you at the tail of the clock. I can only give you 2 hours. I can meet you at 6 o'clock. And he said, oh, the tail of the clock in Beverly Hills. I said, no, in the Valley. It was dead silence. He said, you live in the Valley. I said, yes, Mr. Kramer, I do. And who could blame me for not wanting to come over that hill? I said, I don't need dinner that badly. And then he said, no. He said, I'll be there. So we meet in the Valley at tail of the clock. Oh, 8 o'clock, gotta go. So my manager says to me 2 days later, how did it go? I said, okay, here's how it went. I said, first of all, I'm never going to work for this man. And I'll guarantee you, none of your clients are ever going to work for this man because I was so rude because I didn't want to be there. I did you the favor. I got out, but I said, but I'm never going to see this man again. I end up in the hospital with an appendix. It almost bursts. It's in all the newspapers. And so guess who calls me? Guess who sends flowers? Guess who says, when you come home, can I bring you dinner? And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this. So I asked my friend, Henry Wilcoxon. Mm-hmm. He was a silent screen star. I was 75 years old at the time. He was one of my dear friends. He was Cecil B. DeMille's right-hand guy. I said, Henry, can you just do me a favor and drop in accidentally and I'll invite you in. You'll carry the evening because I don't want to be rude. But, this hurts. I'm just not getting, I'm still trying to get over the operation. So he said, sure. Well, he comes. They bond like crazy. Now, Henry Wilcoxon was one of the greatest chefs. I learned everything I know about cooking from him. He was great. And he made a great dinner, and they bond like crazy. So I would meet Mr. Kramer at Henry's, and I would sit there and listen to him talk. And I fell madly in love with him and married him just about 3 months later. And the last show I did was a Wild Wild West that had been written for me opposite Carol O'Connor. I couldn't tell anybody that I was getting married because we wanted to keep it a secret from the press. But I knew that was my last line, my last scene, my last everything. And the next morning, Stanley and I went to Ventura County to get our license, and we were married at 4 o'clock that afternoon, and it hit the front page of the newspaper in spite of the fact we were keeping this a secret. And I never looked back. So that was my story.
Thank you for sharing your memories. What a lot of fun she was. I'm so glad that she was able to join us, and her daughter, Karen Sharpe, was in the audience with us that day, and it made it special because Kat has her own career going. She's done multiple podcasts, and she is an entertainer and looks like her mother. Just beautiful.
That sounds like you and me almost. We love family stories here on A Word on Westerns. Family stories and nepotism.
Well, you're taller and thinner and better looking, but you don't have the wealth of knowledge on Westerns, but you're technically so proficient. That's why we're able to do this show, because I certainly couldn't do it without you.
Well, I certainly couldn't do it without you, but
Hey, this is a great mutual thing back and forth.
It really is. It really is. It's so cool that we were able to, take things that we are both passionate about and develop them into a format that we get to share that with the rest of you guys.
And we couldn't do this without all of you out there, the listeners, enjoying film history as much as we do. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us in the future on A Word on Westerns, the podcast.
Adios and happy trails.
If you enjoy what we do here, please take a moment to follow our show and share these interviews with your friends.
You can also find A Word on Westerns on Patreon, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you, and see you next week on A Word on Westerns. A Word on Westerns is produced and hosted by Rob and RJ Word, and produced by Caroline Parker Stark. Edited by Alex Lockett and Bohr and Ebor Dro. Location audio is provided by Richard Reagan. Sound design by Alex Lockett. A Word on Westerns theme song was composed by Karel Pasoda, with additional arrangements by Shipwreck Music and RJ Word.